I'm going to let Professor Gina Kim introduce them. I just wanted to welcome everyone to the Mittal Institute, to say a little bit about who we are in case you don't know us. The Mittal Institute in various forms has been around for over 2 decades now. It's focused on all kinds of work in South Asia. We work in every country across the region, doing everything from hard science to climate change to the arts. We have a multifaceted arts program going. We also do long-term research projects. We're doing maybe one of the most ambitious healthcare projects ever undertaken in Indian history. We've just published a book on the partition of British India, which is unique because it actually looks at the living records and history of survivors from Bangladesh, modern day Bangladesh, which was then East Pakistan, as well as India and Pakistan. And we are growing. So I want to say, for those of you who know us and for those of you who don't know us, we are really growing in a very fast way, and people who have interesting ideas about the kinds of work we should be doing that is focused on South Asia, we would love to hear from you. So do reach out to me. I won't keep you very long about the Mittal Institute, except to say that the largest project we're undertaking is going to be on climate change in South Asia. It's going to be cross-border, since the climate doesn't stop at man-made borders, along with some art projects that we're doing with Gina. So let me just, I don't think Gina needs much of an introduction, but let me nevertheless, if you'll allow me, to give a bit of an introduction, to say, first of all, Gina is, of course, the faculty director of the Mittal Institute's arts program. And being connected with her has been one of the joys of my work. She has brought this extraordinary energy and brought our arts program into multiple different facets, everything from the exchange of artists we have here to projects in India where we're working directly with museums on conservation, preservation, and scientific understanding of materials. I'll tell you a bit about that. Gina is the, and let me read this so I don't get this wrong. Gina is the George P. Bickford Professor of Indian and South Asian Art. Her research and teaching interests cover a pretty diverse range of topics. She's looking at the image between text and the relationship between text and image, representations of women, of patronage, and how sacred objects are reappropriated. She has a number of books. I'll just mention the ones that I have on my shelf and I still look at all the time, and our son, who's going to take her class. Receptacle of the Sacred, Illustrated Manuscripts and the Buddhist Book Cult in South Asia. That's 2013. And her second book was Garland of Visions, Color, Tantra, and a Material History of Indian Painting, 2021. She has a major work in progress paper, Pothi and the Goddess, History of Devi Manuscripts and Gender in the Art of the Book in South Asia. She's also, outside of her work that's strictly academic, she's also doing this extraordinary project, which if you have not seen, you should see and hear about. It's called Mapping Color and History. It's focusing on color and pigment in painting. What she's doing is building a website, and there will be available analysis of the painted materials, of the pigments in South Asian painting, broken down into their chemical elements and formulas, available as a public commons. And it's a way of thinking about both the science, the technique, the skill, the history, and the sociology of this complex place. So, Gina, I don't want to take more time, but it's really a pleasure to be up here with you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you both artists.
All right. Well, thank you, Ted. Ted Kutty, of course, is our executive director. Wonderful and one and only. So thank you, Ted, for that generous introduction. It's not about me, so let's go straight to our evening's program. So thank you for joining us. I'm glad to have so many people go up for this program, for the Visiting Artists Exhibition opening event. So it's part of the arts program at the Mittal Institute, Visiting Artists program. And let me give you a little bit of background if you haven't been to one of our events. for the visiting artist program, it started in 2015 actually. So we welcomed our first cohort in fall 2015. And its seed for development for this particular rendition of visiting artist program actually started in 2014. So in a way, we're looking at almost 10 years coming up soon when we started thinking about the importance of art in understanding education about South Asia, also in South Asia, and like the art education and sort of understanding of art in terms of fostering civic engagement. And we sort of identified there was a meeting across the campus of thinking about the sort of initiative and the arts and a few strategic areas of focus, one of which was the visiting artist program that bring artists from South Asia to campus for immersive program with no strings attached. So the program is made possible through the generous funding from the Arts Advisory Council of the Lakshmi Mittal and Family Self-Care Institute, and Arts Advisory Council is chaired by Dr. Dipti Mathur, with council members from different parts of South Asia, the UK, the US, who share the mission of supporting the development, preservation, and promotion of arts of South Asia in the global stage. The program is designed to provide a precious opportunity for South Asia-based artists to sort of come to Harvard and engage with the Harvard community. And also the Harvard community get to engage with the artists from South Asia learn about their diverse perspective. So the aim is really to create a channel of communication and interactions that would inspire both the members of the Harvard community and the artists coming from South Asia. And as the visiting artists, actually during their time, they get to audit classes and engage with faculty with whom the research and artistic interests align. And I think you're already attending some classes, and you get to access the library and the museums in the area. And these are amazing resources for artists whose practices require deep research. I think our program is still sort of has this aspect of civic engagement in artistic practices as one of the pillars or hallmarks, I would say. So often our visiting artists really directly engage with pressing social, political, cultural, and environmental issues, and through sort of innovative artistic methods and means. So we do host 2 artists from South Asia per semester for 2 months. And I'm thrilled that we have 2 visual artists from India with us this semester, both of whom are actually deeply concerned with ecological issues in their artistic practice. And both artists, as you will see, are very strong in showing us new visions, so new visual languages to articulate and think about the nature-human relationship in a way, sort of a visual critique of the Anthropocene, I would say. And because I'm curating an exhibition on climate injustice, focusing on the global South, especially focusing on South Asia, they will open in fall 2023 at Radcliffe. It's titled Water Stories, River Goddesses, Ancestral Rights, and Climate Crisis. And I'm particularly so excited to have these artists thinking with me about ecological concerns and issues and showing me different ways that they're approaching this. So we already had some productive conversation, I think. And they will be here until the end of April. So after today, if you see them on campus, please say hello and introduce yourselves and make connections. And so let me introduce our visiting artist fellows who will tell us about their practices, and we'll open it up to Q&A after their presentation. So I guess I'll introduce both of them. Or should I go one by one? I think, yeah, one by one. So just both of them at the same time. Yeah. What do you want?
As you feel.
All right. Okay, so so we have 2 artists. The first artist that will share her work is Dhara Mehrotra, and she's a visual artist based out of Bangalore. She received an MFA in painting from College of Art, Delhi University, India in 2005. And she has received numerous awards, including Swapan Viswas Award for Academic Excellence and the Junior Fellowship Award from the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. And she was also selected for, and this is among many awards that she received. I can't recite whole CV here, or resume here, so I'm just going to select a few. She was also selected for several prestigious residency programs, including the Artist in Residence program and exhibition at Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Bangalore, and Meta Artist in Residence project in 2021. And this Meta, I realized, is the Facebook right? And you will see why Facebook like her work and why their metaverse folks are interested in her work. And she has done numerous exhibitions and installation projects, including at Indie Art Fair, Goethe Institute New Delhi and Kolkata. I can't read the whole thing, but she has participated in numerous domestic and international projects, and including like one in Madrid, Spain, and in Shanghai, and even in Georgia. Yes. So according to her artist statement, her work explores and celebrates patterns in how things organize themselves. She, I will quote, improvises upon micro landscape and its inherent ecology to realize synergy and interrelationship between things to outgrow the notion of isolated consciousness. And you will see what she means by this momentarily. And the selection committee was really impressed by the stunning yet sensitive visualization of micro landscape that also materializes in space, not only sort of on 2D, but in 3D. And I was particularly drawn to her work for how she works with this mycelium, an important but under-recognized organism in nature, not only visually, but also conceptually. And I must add that recent scholarship on sort of interconnected histories and ecological histories has taken really notice of this mycelium as powerful phenomenon that can help recognize rarely visible connections across different spatial and sort of even temporal points. Maybe I'll start with there, and then I'll introduce Manjot after you speak.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Jana. Thank you, Mittal Swadeshi Institute, for this opportunity and fellowship. I'll jump straight to the presentation. So my work is largely about clusters and networks in nature, and I like to understand the phenomena of self-organization and how the patterns emerge in it, and the process of finding self-organizing patterns in nature can be a very systematic endeavor, and that puts my practice at the intersection of art and science. And what I'm doing at the moment is I'm looking at the mycelium networks, this body of work that I have been working on for the last few years. Mycelium, as we all know, are these very fine thread-like fungal networks which connect the trees below ground in sort of a communication network. And these mycelium is in symbiotic relationship with the trees and the plants in the forest, and they are in highly beneficial relationship with the plants. They enhance their well-being and consequently the well-being of the planet. So in today's presentation, I will be sharing about the inceptions of this journey, the body of work as it unfolded over the last few years, and purpose of my focus while at Harvard. So these were the beginnings. I collaborated with the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Bangalore, where we cultured fungal networks in Petri dish, looked them under the microscope, and the image is not very clear in this, but what we saw, barely a few millimeters of cultured rock would give such lace-like patterns. Just one would imagine what it's doing actually out there in the woods where it spreads across miles. I also looked into the scanning electron microscopic images of the other specimens from soil, because that constitutes the immediate environment of mycelium. And we also looked into the roots, how they are growing and inoculating with mycelium. So small plants would be cultured in transparent mediums where we can observe this up close, the entire process of the root growth. So this is the plant epigenetic lab facility at NCBS Bangalore, and this is where most of the research happened. It concluded into an exhibition where I did some installations, and we published a catalog on the observations. And these were the beginnings of the Wood Wide Web story. And the Wood Wide Web, as we know, is a term used for mycelium to explain the internet of the plant world. So the way the World Wide Web connects us, the scientists believe Wood Wide Web is the internet of the plant world, which connects all the greens across the planet. These are some of my early drawings, which were based and inspired out of the microscopic imagery I was doing at the Institute. Some of them are my own images. And also I took help from other researchers who were doing similar work in that field back then. This was the first wall installation project I did for the Goethe Institute, New Delhi and Kolkata. So here the architecture space was used as the canvas. So the facade of the building becomes the first point of invitation, and it leads, as the video is showing, into the passage, the lobby, the gallery. It was literally kind of colonizing their entire architecture, but it did get the message across. An iteration of this installation was commissioned by Meta for the Hyderabad space. Back then they were called as Facebook. And it was a very interesting project because, as we know, Meta is the technology of social networks. And then this particular installation talks about mycelium networks, the technology faced with the fungal networks, the plant intelligence, how they are facilitating this social network with the plants. So they particularly kind of talk about, they are similar in some ways and yet different at the same time. So it was a very interesting experience doing this installation for them. It's a large piece spread over 40 feet by 10 feet. Well, besides the wall installation, I was also interested in looking at the microscopic life of mycelium. So I would just imagine how to give it a visual to that feeling of what's happening down there at the microscopic levels. I would assign a color to each nutrient that plant would usually use for their own, for kind of their nourishment, for making food for themselves. So I would say give a blue for carbon, red for nitrogen, yellow for phosphorus, and so on, and then assume how these color interactions would visually take place. So these were some artworks that came up as that on that lines of thinking. This is another iteration. The idea was essentially to celebrate the interconnected coexistence that exists. We barely know much, we don't know enough about them. So imagination, imaginary space with collaboration with science was giving me a little, kind of was fueling this project and the series of work for me. So it is believed that a spoonful of soil has more living organisms in it than the entire population on the planet. So it just, one would imagine what's actually happening down there at those microscopic levels. So these are illustrations of all the chatter and noise, perhaps, which is happening, which meets us, what meets the eye as the silence of the woods is actually a huge amount of chatter that's going on. And so it just kept on getting more complex, more intricate, more detailed, and but yet in a very abstract space. The noise, the idea was the noise, because there's very less that we know about it. So that abstraction was always very empowering for that imagination. Yeah, these are some more words. So basically I was using what is known about it to imagine the large unknown, using the facts of science, hypothesis, and the imaginative space, all in the realm of the larger than life art. This particular body of work is called Of Warps and Wefts. This is about the idea of how the whole is always larger than the sum of its parts, and yet each part is a whole organization in itself. It's a whole entity in itself. And science happens to be the closest possible language in which we can attempt to understand these intelligent microscopic life as much as possible in our own way. This body of work is called Labyrinth. This is a very straightforward monochromatic representation of layers of life, suppose spread across a patch of land, and just like gold is found in a mine, scattered and randomly positioned. And this mycelium network just connects it all as a resource to nourish the entire ecosystem of that patch. They are wired in such ways that anything that plugs into these networks benefits from them. This is from a body of work called Winds Carry a Kingdom. It was largely about the idea of spores and seeds that spores are basically the word for seeds that mycelium exuberates in the air. So for reproduction, they are in millions that are released, and it's like however tiny they are, each is preciously programmed to unfold a kingdom or a civilization of its own. So that idea was poetically, scientifically, and overall just very convincing. This particular piece here, I've tried to use an image of compressed mycelium, and that brings to my focus and research while at Howard. I'm looking at the materiality and design. Both material and design are very important aspects of my art practice. And I'm looking into the research about nano, micro, macro biofabrication, and understand the structural color, and about the design element, and trying to understand how the ecologically, environmentally conscious design ideas and knowledge of it as it goes forward. This slide shows some of the material that I use. That's jute, coir. Those are inks and pigments that pigments especially that I make in studio myself, and I use inks. The image below shows the process of my work, which actually is about perhaps dozens of sketches being done over half a dozen sketchbooks at the same time parallelly, and the final image will surface from there. And I would like to conclude my presentation by showing you these. That's what a mycelium material looks like. Mycelium is considered as the material of the future. It's highly sustainable, and you see this is a jute specimen of what mycelium mats look like under the ground. A compressed version of it would make a material like this, which is the material of future. It's highly sustainable. It can replace industrial material in many ways. It has high potential. And I'm looking at enhancing my research in some of these ways. And that's what I'm looking forward to do at Howard. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was brilliant. And I think there will be a lot of questions, and we're going to do Q&A after the second presentation. So our second artist, Manjot Kaur, comes to us from Chandigarh, and she received both BFA in painting from the Government College of Art Chandigarh in 2010, followed by an MFA in painting, also from the Government College of Art in 2012. Trained initially as a painter, it seems from her CV, I think. Her practice encompasses different media, engaging in contemporary miniature paintings, video animation, and immersive interactive installations. She also received numerous awards, including the INLUX Scholarship for Artist Residence in Italy, an annual award from the Punjab Dallit Kala Academy in 2019 and 2018. And again, she also has a long list of awards that I'm not going to read off. According to her artist statement, her work intersects boundaries of speculative fiction, archetypal allegories, and precarious ecologies to push back against the centering of human as a protagonist. Her works explore the sovereignty of women's bodies and ecology, and as you will see shortly, her work, I will quote directly, cross-pollinate ancient mythologies with fiction to reflect on the relationship between human and more than humans. And the selection committee was really impressed by Manjot's bold visual language and creative approaches to tradition and ecological concerns. And I was particularly drawn to her work's power to tell stories, new stories, making something familiar unfamiliar and making something completely strange familiar. There is like an interesting push and pull that some of the images are not easy to look at, I don't think, but then you start really kind of unraveling, and it's quite fascinating. It tells different stories. So it's really that push and pull, I think, is quite what's quite marvelous about her work, and you'll see what I mean very soon. So I'll turn it over to Manjot. Thank you, Professor Jinnah, for the beautiful introduction. And thank you so much to Mittal Institute for bringing me here and giving me this exciting opportunity to push forward my research. So today I'm going to pose a lot of questions, like one question with each work. How do we mourn for what we have lost? What stories should we narrate to offer notions of care? How do the worlds that we create in fantasy impact our thinking practices? This work is titled as While She Gives Birth to an Ecosystem, where goddess Lajja Gauri is represented as giving birth to an ecosystem rather than a human child. So inventing fiction from mythology and the natural world offers me with powerful tools to demodernize the existing dualist constructs of nature and culture, therefore raising questions concerning the sovereignty and of women and ecology, as well as concerning power and agency. So this image proposes an alternative meaning of motherhood in present times and proposes narratives for a multi-species future. Resonating on ethical, ecological, and social levels, this image represents an exuberant biodiversity and lays down the foundation for the emergence of a forest. With this work, I wonder, what are the implications of fertility and the desire to procreate in the present times? This is a reference image of Goddess Lajja Gauri. Basically, Goddess Lajja Gauri is associated with abundance, fertility, and sexuality. She's usually invoked for vegetative fertility and good progeny. A blossoming lotus replaces her head and neck, denoting youth and also bringing focus to her genitals. She is usually depicted in birthing or a squatting posture. This work is titled as When a Tree Grew Out of Her Womb. Here, one of the most revered ancient Egyptian goddess named Tauret rebirths inside a botanical womb, while herself giving birth to a tree. 5,000 years ago, it was believed that Tauret, a diminutive deity, could save thousands of children of humans, but humans could not save Tauret from themselves, given the fact that both hippopotami and lions, which once roamed freely in Egypt, are extinct there. With this work, I wonder, what does it mean when an archaic goddess who once protected humans now rebirths inside an imaginary botanical womb, while herself giving birth to a tree? This is a reference image. So she's also known as the Great One, the goddess who protects mother and children. She's the composite figure of hippopotamus, crocodile, lion, and human. This work is titled as The Botanical Womb. Basically, I painted the earlier image first, and then I realized while I'm painting the inner side of the womb, how would the womb look from outside? So for me, this acts as a new iconography, as a means to find fresh ways to elucidate the motherly phenomena. These are some of the detail images. With this work, I wonder, how would I care for the trees and forests if my womb gave birth to plants? Now I'm going to talk about a collective body of work. Collectively, it is called, I've titled it as Hybrid Beings. So to imagine forms of relationality and mutuality, these paintings invoke romantic relationships between birds and women. The women are selected heroines who belong to Ashtnayika. Ashtnayika is a collective name for 8 types of heroines as classified by Bharat in Sanskrit treaty on performing arts, Natya Shastra, written in 2nd century BC. So each of the heroine represents a different emotional state in relationship to her hero. In each painting, the face of Nayika is a heroine. So in each painting, the face of Nayika is metamorphosed with her lover's face, resulting in hybrid beings. Hybrid beings postulate a queer ecology, where the bird becomes the hero, replacing the male figure from the context of Ashtanaika. They stitch together improbable collaborations in a multi-species world, making way for kinship and responding to ecological grief and loneliness. This painting from the same series is a story of Utka Naika and the white-bellied heron. Utka Naika is the one who waits anxiously for her lover. So here she's sitting on a bed of champa flowers, waiting for her lover, the white-bellied heron, who is now a critically endangered bird. Some detailed images. So searching forms for relationality, reciprocity, and mutuality within natural, ancestral, and human worlds. With this work, I wonder what happens when boundaries between human and non-human worlds intersect. This is Prashita Bhartruka and the Bengal Florican. I'm sorry. So Prashita Bhartruka is the one with the sojourning lover. So here she's writing a letter to her lover, the Bengal Florican, who also happens to be a critically endangered bird. While at the same time, she is also searching for him on her flying carpet. So with this work, I wonder, could hybrid beings generate hope and care to cultivate the capacity to reimagine a future with the marginalized and silenced? This is Abhisarika and the Gerald's cruiser. Abhisarika Naika is the one who goes to meet her lover in the dark. So here she's venturing into a forest full of dangers to search for her lover, the Gerald's cruiser, who is also a critically endangered nocturnal bird endemic to South India. The flora and mountains in the painting are bent as if they are collectively gazing at each moment of Abhisarika. With this work, I wonder how to create a sustainable and interdependent relations between biodiversity and human progress to future-proof our planet for generations to come. This is Swadhin Patika and Oahu Akialau. Swadhin Patika is the one having her husband in subjection. So here she sits on the throne of leaves, along with her lovers, Oahu Akialau, the now extinct Hawaiian honey creeper bird. For me, hybrid beings become a window to peek into the future and past animals, future and past beings, future and past myths that have gone extinct, or those are yet to evolve either naturally or with the biogeohacking of the present day technology. This is the reference image. So for all my images, I kind of like take a lot of reference images and I change the context and I put them in different contexts. And at times I remove the context. So with this work, I wonder what kind of possibilities exist for queer relations with other organisms in the age of artificial intelligence and technology. This is Khandita and the rainbow bee-eater. This painting narrates the story when Khandita, who is enraged with her lover because her lover did not show up at the promised time, but rather comes home next morning. She feels offended. And she rebukes her lover for infidelity. Therefore, she creates a separation with the tree on which she lives. For me, these intimate paintings become personal totems that propose philosophical romantic relationships with birds. With this work, I wonder, what can totemism teach us about kinship and interspecies love and care in the present times? Vipralabdha and the sociable lapwing. Vipralabdha is one who is deceived by her lover. So here she's throwing away her jewelry as she waited the whole night for her lover. The sociable lapwing, the critically endangered bird. With this work, I wonder, could these hybrid beings who are yearning, longing, and anxious to see their loved ones themselves become an embodiment of the love and the lover that they are seeking. This is Vasika Sajja and the common house sparrow. So Vasika Sajja is one who is dressed up for union. So here she sits in her bed chamber with lotus leaves and flora, waiting for the union with her lover. That's the common house sparrow. She's eager with her lover's arrival and for love's pleasure. She's longing to reunite, procreate, and multiply. For me, hybrid beings push back against the centering of human and move towards a thinking that eradicates the hierarchy of beings and challenges the human, non-human binary. They open up possibilities for a post-human and a post-queer world, where beings sort of like move towards a new kind of becoming. They make way for ontological pursuit of what it means to be human, what it means to be non-human, what it means to be endangered, what it means to be extinct, and where these meanings and definitions rupture and collide. With this work, I wonder, what would be my response to ecology if ecology is my beloved? Thank you so much. Let's take a look.
Great, brilliant. Well, thank you. So I think we're going to have, we'll open it up to questions from the audience, but I would actually, although Manjit, you're talking about very figurative, like your practice in terms of the visual language, like very figurative and very abstract, but there is like definitely a conversation here that could be had between you two in a way. Wonder if you can actually comment or respond to each other's work, like what you found interesting and connecting points.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. That is the source that inspires us is the same. And what we take from it and interpret are two different ways of thinking. That's how it is. I look at things in, I like to see the patterns, which could be just geometric or some sort of patterns, very intuitive, subjective. However, in her work, I see everything has a form, a clarity, which is identifiable with something that we know in nature. So that's one of my reflections, which we've been talking also about.
So basically, we've been talking largely about mycelium and how things are interconnected in the world, under the ground, how forests come alive, how forests think. And basically, that is also my current research that I'm thinking about how forests are social being and also thinking about the rights of nature in a way, how if corporations could have rights, why cannot a tree could have a right? Given that we always call it as an it, why not, another way of calling an entity, for example, a living entity in a way. So usually when we are talking together, we're talking about mycelium and things that are connecting in a way. And for me, I like to kind of like create these facts into stories that people could understand, normal people, like my mother, for example, who knows nothing about mycelium, or maybe my neighbors, for example. So, but if they understand, like look into these stories, maybe, they could kind of like be able to think. That's my kind of like take on the knowledge, that we are kind of like exploring, and we're also doing a lot of site visits together, like the Arboretum at the forests.
So that's wonderful. And I thought these, this sort of the connected sort of nature motifs, like even the roots that are entangled, they're so strongly kind of in both works. So in a way, your work is very figurative, but it also has the abstract elements that is quite resonating. And I was actually also curious about your sort of approach to sort of scientific knowledge versus its representation through art, and how much of it is really sort of trying to, so that, there's a whole visualization tools that are going to just randomly visualize, like based on algorithm to visualize the relationships.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is actually making different set of meanings, it seems. And how much of your images actually kind of try to translate the scientific facts as the computer would do versus what you're actually creating a new setup. So how would you compare your work to sort of the digitally generated, computer generated, algorithm generated?
That's a very vital point. Yeah. So I I discuss a lot with the scientists, the mycologists, the people who are researching in it. And it becomes like what they are looking at in a very algorithmic way in something very mathematical language, or the language which is very scientific, highly objective. I see the same thing, the same data, but I don't use the same baggage of their representation. I use a little bit of an artistic, larger than life space to imagine, which is fact, fiction, hypothesis, imagination, all put together in an artistic realm. So it there is a certain there is no kind of, what do you say, like a program in it. So each time there are a couple of organizations I'm involved with who are mapping the actual mycelium, and every place it is different. So there's no one way to see it. And perhaps the machine version would be to program it based on a few patterns, and that is what it's going to iterate further. And as I kind of go to this part, I look at the things, I talk to the people, and then I take it in my space, then just mix it up, these things, and just see what comes out. And that's what the body of work comes up as. So there are different bodies of work. Some talks about the network, some talks about the microorganisms that they are connecting, and the chatter, where the chatter is less, and then the idea of the mother tree and the whole connection. So I kind of connect with that in different ways in my practice. So I hope that
Yes,
slightly answers.
I think there are already like questions to be asked, so I see like hands going up.
My name is Karthik Gandhi. I'm a plant biologist. It is a beautiful your narration. Something super. As you mentioned, why not a tree, right? Just 2 years ago in New Zealand, the government gave rights to a river. Can you imagine a river being given a right? So likewise, a South American country also did the same thing. So even though in India, I mean, we are all supposed to be spiritual people, India didn't go to that far. And probably you can input something about sacred growth in your thought. Anyway, you spoke quite well and good points. The narration was well.
I also have some comments, and I'm an ecologist and at the School of Design and also in biology. And I mean, this visualization of kind of the networks as something super cooperative and nice. I mean, it's real in some point, but there's also kind of challenge in many ways. So I think it's good if thinking about this like a structure with different functions. Those functions are, cooperation is kind of not a very common thing, I would say, in nature. I don't know. And kind of challenge that, but cooperation is something not as ideal we find in nature. Is cooperation basically happens as a result of kind of environmental situation. You have two species that are kind of competing in some way for resources. In some way, that competition can become a mutualism. So, for instance, happening between plants and some fungi. But that mutualism, if environment changes, can become again a pathogenic interaction or somewhat a kind of neutral interaction. So that's why I think this functional dimension in this network is so interesting, because it's true, sometimes it works as a cooperative network, but sometimes it's actually a venue for dispersed diseases, and other times it's a way to attack competitors. And so it's a very complex network in many ways. And I think I want to send you a new paper that just came out like a few weeks ago, challenging all the vision cooperative networks. And it's so interesting. It's not because it's not real, it's because it's a bit overestimated, but it's also interesting to see the whole dimension of this kind of interaction that are happening underground in forest, specifically in forests. And I think it's just so interesting. In any event, the artistic part is amazing. I was just amazed to see both completely different approaches of tackling similar issues and in an amazing way. So thank you very much.
That's beautiful. Yes, the chatter basically. So there are pathogenic interactions which are happening as well. There is a competition as well as there is a symbiotic relationship. So the chatter is basically that noise that happens, that interconnectedness that happens, the fact that they are alive, they are thinking, they are intelligent. So that becomes a very important overall picture for me to think. But yes, that I hear you, that those are very valid points, and I would love to read that paper.
Yeah, same. Well, so I will think,
Oh.
oh, no, I think there is a question behind you, and then I'll 1, 2, 3, how's that? Yes.
My name is Priyanka Singh. I'm a PhD student in government department. Thank you so much for the time. So from an artistic standpoint, given that your subjects are very scientific and biological, how would you both navigate the boundary between staying true to representing something in its, very, like, for example, the bird or the mouse, I'm not correct, the boundary between being very scientifically accurate representation versus seeing things in your own artistic vision.
Yeah, that's a very great point. I'm glad you brought that up. So that's where, for me, the scientific interaction comes into the picture. So every time I go back and forth with the group of people and some organizations that I'm working with to show what I'm doing, have some sort of an approval, some sort of it is not misleading. And although there's hypothesis, there is imaginative space, there is larger than life always. And once that element is confirmed, then I kind of validate, what I'm doing is, okay, I can think in that direction. So that's one way. Another thing, there are certain groups, they are actually mapping, as I was telling Professor Jana, they're actually mapping these networks in real time. So they have exact graphical, statistical data with them. And based on computer algorithms, they are using some of those into images, but those images are still very data-based. It's not the art space kind of image that we would look at. So I am continuously in touch with them to make sure that I try to do that. However, that being said, there is an artistic license involved here. There is a larger than life thinking, and I kind of enjoy that. So I do take liberties at times. At the same time, I try to stay as close as possible to the truth.
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm very interested in the speculative fiction aspect of it. And I try to kind of borrow a lot of facts from the current research and also from the current crisis. I would say, like, what is going on right now and what are the reasons for why it is happening. I don't think so I need to mention that we are very well aware of that. So I kind of imagine to think what could happen in the future and on a positive note and not on a negative note. So I like to kind of create stories, and my question over here would be I would like to answer your question with a question that my approach is how could I convert the facts and the current research into stories that people could understand. So over here, I kind of when I'm representing the birds, I try to represent it as real as possible. But then I also like to metamorph it with women and then imagine what kind of species would evolve, or would it ever evolve, or would it not? And then further criticize the fact, if it evolves, what are the repercussions? What then? So yeah, so that's kind of my approach with a lot of imagination and creativity that takes the charge. So.
Thanks. That's such a great presentation. I'm a faculty member in the History of Art and Architecture department, and I was very curious about your interest in material and scale. So just what guides your choice of materials when you're working, and perhaps the scale at which you're operating as well. And then thinking about what new materials or processes or scales we're adopting now in your current practices.
I think address to both. Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So, to be honest, I'm not looking too much about new materials into my own painting. I'm very much interested in how, the new discoveries, what is happening. For example, how people are trying to understand how forests are social beings, how they talk, how they communicate, and well, my scale as of moment is this size.
Yeah.
like the paintings are displayed on the fourth floor, and the print is actual representation of an actual work, so it's actually up to scale. In the future, I do have some plans to go a bit more bigger in a way, but what you are seeing today is not a representation of my entire portfolio, is not what I do at large. I also animate my paintings, and I also do immersive installations. So where I'm interested that the work gets completed with the participation of the audience, that I am not the creator, I am the facilitator for the work to get completed. So in that sense, it depends like what is the concept and is it needed, like are people going to, is it going to be our thinking that is going to make the work? Is it your writing? So and then like for me, it varies every time that way. And for my paintings, I use gouache and watercolors on paper. largely.
One question. Are the plant materials, are they imaginary or real or a hybrid nature between your imagination and real?
Do you mean the plants that I depict in my paintings? I study a lot of plants. Like let's say if I made like a heroine who was sitting on orange flowers. So I was studying the bird, that where does the bird nest? So the bird nests on champak trees. So I was looking at what kind of champak trees exist around me or in other parts of the world. What is the color of the flowers? And then I try to kind of like, I imitated those flowers, but like, for example, in one of the painting, the Naika had like a whole tree wrapped around her. So that is entirely fictitious. I'm also interested in making some fictitious plants. So how could kind of like two species come and, become hybrid and, something else could sort of like show up. So there's like this boundary for me, it keeps kind of like moving from reality to fiction and from fiction to reality.
The reason I ask was, sometimes the art department contact us for identification of plant material. It were drawn sometime in the 8th century. It was not easy. And something to come up with only maybe.
So scale is very important when I work across scales. Because I look at the patterns, and patterns are from micrometers to light years away. There is certain kind of commonality, and that interests and excites me and informs my practice a lot. So the installation that you saw, I am imagining the actual forest at a rather, it's still a base small representation of what actually is there. And then I kind of try to use it in as much a scale as possible up to show the actual impact of, or not actually, it can't really be actual, it's just that how close as possible you can see it. Material becomes important in the same context, because I'm talking about mycelium, natural networks, and so fiber and something which is organic, something which has a natural feel to it. I try to use that to imitate mycelium for now, because the real mycelium, we tried it as an ephemeral installation material. There is still research going on to make it more archival so that the real mycelium can also be used in as material forward. But that's where these little kind of sort of my little findings and research would, I hope, unfold certain parts where I don't have to imitate that anymore. But to imitate as well, I use organic matter. I use the closest possible material to see how I can illustrate that or get the whole essence of the network as it actually exists in nature. That's about it.
If you work microscopic, then you observe the mycelium.
Yes, I do. So I interact with the science faculties where they help me work with the.
Harvard or
This is at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Bangalore, in India.
I'm from there. I mean, yeah, that's okay. Since I'm speaking,
However, yeah, looking at research material.
Okay, I think I have a question here and also here. So, well, let's see how many minutes we have. Yeah.
Well, thank you for such rich and beautiful evocative work for both of you. I was wondering whether Donna Haraway was an influence.
Definitely.
Oh, okay. And if you had a chance to see the exhibit over at the Lister Visual Arts Center, then I think it just ended. It was all about symbiance.
I've heard about that, but that happened just before we arrived.
okay.
So we made it.
So, and just to mention that you brought up that Donna Haraway, I am very kind of like moved by her thinking about like how she kind of like explores the concept of compost, the concept of humus, and also the children of compost. That's the last chapter in her book, Staying with the Trouble. So that's very dear. That chapter is very dear to me. Kind of like that became the basis for the hybrid beings. I read that before that, and I was just imagining that how she's imagining species in the future to be in kinship with other beings, and then probably, and then in the, like, you know, she talks about make kin, not population.
I'm really sort of asking this, I guess, from the lifestyle of food. And I'd like to ask you, Amanda, that there was a tantric cult in the 10th and 11th century where all the female deities' heads were replaced by animals as a sort of an extinguishing of the ego. And all of your females are, the heads are replaced by birds. And is there any influence there or not?
There's a lot of influence there, and I have not done so much research into that part. Basically, that is also one of my focus areas while being in Harvard, that I want to read more about those gods and goddesses who are animal headed. Well, to start with, like my presentation started with Lalchavari. The lotus on her head was my starting point. Why does she have a flower motif on her head? And then how it's and then it was very unusual for me to read that it is she's related with the aspect of fertility, and she doesn't have a big face. Definitely. And on this note, I also want to let everybody know that there's a sign-up list upstairs on 4th floor. I'm up for solo or clubbed up studio visits on dates mentioned, times mentioned. I have like 1 or 2 of my actual works also here with me, so I would be happy to show my actual paintings, talk more about my process and other works which I've not talked about over here.
Wonderful.
Professor.
Thank you everyone for coming, for Gina.
I forgot to thank Sneh.
Ending, but we should really thank not only our entire team and all 3 of you. I want to thank you. I actually had many questions, but now you're spared the idiotic questions. I also particularly want to say thanks, Neha, who helps us put this program together from the soup to nuts, as they say, or if you would say from imagination to reality. So,
I would love to invite everybody upstairs to the 4th floor for some snacks and refreshments and drinks, and continue the conversation with the artists. Their work is up, the prints of their work is up stairs as well. So let's continue the conversation upstairs. Please don't go
So
anywhere.
thank you all for coming.
Yeah.